Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Batra Daf Tetzayin. This week's learning is sponsored by Debbie Pershan in loving memory of her mother, Shirley Kaufman, on her yurtzeit. And today's daf is sponsored by Hadran Women of Long Island in honor of the Aliyah of our amazing and talented leader and co-learner Gita Neufeld, and on the birth of a granddaughter, which, by the way, is going to come up in today's daf. So I should say somewhat beware. See what you think about what we learned about granddaughters. We wish you lots of mazal in this newest edition and know that you will lead her in the ways of Daf Yomi as she grows up. We also wish you hatzlacha in making this amazing long-awaited move to Eretz Israel, as long as you know this does not let you off the hook for planning and organizing our Long Island Shiurs. Mazal tov. Okay, we're going to get started with the bottom of Tef Amud Bet. Today is all about Iyov, except at the end we're going to get on a bit of a tangent about Avraham. We talked before about the comparison Avraham and Iyov. This actually isn't going to come up so much because of Avraham and Iyov, but a different topic. But we did talk already yesterday about the comparison of Avraham and Iyov. They both get tested. The Gemara clearly connects them because the Satan, when he goes lehitalech and sees what he sees in the world, he talks about the praises of Avraham, to which it makes God say, well, what about Iyov? And we're going to see that same thing again. What we're going to do today is, in the beginning of the daf, is we're going to understand there's a narrative. Okay, Iyov for the most part is not a narrative. It's a discussion, conversations between Iyov talking to God, Iyov talking to his friends talking to Iyov, trying to console him. And it's mostly philosophical and very, very hard to understand. You'll see today we're going to quote psukim from all over Iyov, and they're very hard psukim to understand. In a simple reading, just what do the words mean? But the first chapter and the beginning and the second are narratives of what exactly happened to Iyov before this whole thing started. How did it get started? And that's really what we're going to be in the middle of right now, which is, we saw yesterday the beginning, and we saw the verses where the Satan was going around and then came up to the heavens, and then they had this whole discussion, and the Satan said, well, of course you think Iyov is great, because look, right, he has everything. So God says, fine, you could take away everything, just don't touch Iyov. And that's what we're going to see now happens. So we ended yesterday's daf with talking about how great Iyov had things. And it was even against nature, really, that things that were supernatural were happening in his, among his flock. His goats were able to protect themselves from the wolves. And now we're going to see one more thing that's supernatural before we get into it. It's almost setting up how perfect things were, even beyond perfect. And then boom, 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 all the terrible things happen. So 2 lines from the bottom of Tef Amud Bet. Vayihi hayom ubanav u'banotav ochlim v'shotim yayin bebeit achihem habachor. So all of his children are eating in the oldest son's house. Umalach ba Iyov, and we're going to have angel after angel come, and each one is going to tell Iyov about this terrible thing that's going on with all of his things. Vayomer habakara yuchorshot, and first he even gets to, he describes the scenario before the tragedy happened, which is, the animals were plowing, the cattle, and the atonot, okay, my habakara yuchorshot va'atonot ro'ot al yedehen. And then the donkeys, or I forget the exact translation, right? There's aton chamor, forget the difference, right? Maybe the female donkeys were grazing in the fields right there. Now, something doesn't make sense about this pasuk. When you're doing the plowing, it's before you plant. So if it's before you plant, how could there have been things to graze on, right? Grazing means they were eating. He had, it was good, it was like Olam Haba, okay? It was like the world to come, where all these supernatural things were happening, and boom, that's when the tragedy hits. And then they don't even quote the rest of the continuation there, where they describe what happened according to that angel. We're now going to have snippets from the next verses. What they really want to do is get you to chapter 2. So they're going to give you snippets from the very end, from the rest of chapter 1. Right now it's going to be like a Shiur Tanakh. He said, then as he was, this angel finishes and already another one comes. And he said there was a fire of God. Okay, dot, dot, dot. We saw this pasuk yesterday. The Kasdim, which are the Babylonians, came. That's how we put him with the Babylonians, right? They made 3 channels, and then they attacked all the camels and they took them. Okay, dot, dot, dot. As soon as he finishes, another one comes. Okay, so your children were drinking wine in the house of your oldest son, and a big wind came. Okay, see fire, wind, right? Enemies, all the bad things that can happen. And it attacked four corners of the house, and it fell on the young ones. Vayakam Iyov vayikhat mi'ilo vayagazet rosho. So Iyov gets up, he tears his cloak. Right? We know this from Avelud in general, and he shaves his head. Vayomer arom yatzati mi bet enimi va'arom ashuv shama. He says, I came out naked from my mother's womb, and I will go back naked to, back to where I came from. Hashem natan v'Hashem lakach, Yehi Shem Hashem b'farach. This, is very famous, right? God gave, God took, and God's name should be blessed. Okay, this is what we say when people die. B'chol zot lo chata Iyov v'lo natan tefillah l'Elohim. However, Iyov still did not sin to God and did not, tefillah here doesn't mean a prayer. It means he didn't offer any screaming at God, complaining to God. Why did you do this to me? Nothing. So what happens? Well, a repeat. And now we get to the beginning of chapter 2. So chapter 1 is all setting up the scene for the first phase of destruction. Remember, it's all about Iyov's property and Iyov's family, but Iyov is not touched. And now it says here, Vayayom, Vayavo b'nei Elohim ligetzev al Hashem, and it's the exact same psukim as in chapter 1. Again, we have this congregation up in the heavens. Vayomer Hashem al Satan, emi ze tavo, where are you coming from? He says to the Satan, Vayana Satan et Hashem, Vayomer mishot ba'aret, umi hitalech ba, and again, the same word referencing Avraham. So again, the same conversation is going to happen. Exact same with one big difference. Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, shatati b'chol olam v'lo matzati kavdach Avraham. I went around the whole world and I still haven't found anyone as great as Avraham, your servant. Because you said to him, go walk around this land, right? Lengthwise, widthwise, because I'm going to give it to you. And then, lo and behold, what happened after you promised Abraham he was going to get this whole land? When he really needed the land, he needed a place to bury his wife. He couldn't find any place. Right again, and had to pay a lot of money for it. And he didn't say, oh God, didn't you promise me this? And how could it be that I have to pay all this money? So again, praising Avraham in the same way he praised him last time. Vayomar Hashem ala Satan, hasamta v'kal of the Iyov ki en kamo ba'aretz. Now again, right, same thing. But what about Iyov? He's great, and ... right? All the things said before. And now God adds one more thing. Ve'odenu machzik b'tumato, tumato with a taf, not tum'ah, but tumah, like being simple and in the sense of with me all the way. So he's still continuing despite all the terrible things right? And here God says this very interesting phrase, Vatisiteni bo leval ochinam. You seduced me into bringing all these tragedies on him, leval, to swallow him up for no reason, chinam, okay? And basically God says to the Satan, I can't believe, look, he's still with me. And you see, it was all for naught, what you made me do. Now, this is a powerful thing that God's saying, Amar b'yochanan u'malei mikra, where they're not a pasuk saying this. Iyov shalom lo. I would never think to say such a thing. Ka'adam shemisitino tov v'nisek. What? This pasuk is saying that God was seduced into doing something he regretted doing. Could you possibly say that about God, right? God is not someone who's convinced incorrectly, right? God is all powerful, knows everything. God would have known, we believe God knows what is going to happen. God should have known this. How could he have let the Satan convince him to do this? A crazy pasuk, and I can't, if it hadn't been written, there's no way I would ever say such a thing. But Manita Tana, in a Breita, though, it says, and this is kind of a response, again, it wasn't to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan wasn't alive when the Breita were written, but it's a different approach that says, no. This is the job of the Satan. Built into the job of the Satan is to seduce God into doing things. In other words, what does the Satan do? He goes down. Okay, where did they learn this from? From our psukim, right? So he goes down. He tricks, right? He kind of, tries to turn people away. Comes up, margiz, gets God angry, and that's the lahasit, to incite God to do something. then notel Reshut, then he asks for permission, and God gives him permission, and then notel Neshama, and then he kills people. So this is the way it's supposed to work. In other words, it's built into the system that the Satan is there to do this to God. Vayana Satan al Hashem vayomal, ol ba'ad ol v'chol asher li'ish yitem ba'ad nafsho. So the Satan says, listen, skin for skin, anything, people are willing to do anything. Like, you could take my skin, no problem. They're willing, you could take my family, they're willing to give up everything in order to keep themselves alive. It's an interesting theory. Right, not everybody, some people are willing to give their lives for their children, or give their lives for other people, right? When in the middle of a war, that's what people do. But what he's saying here is, you made a deal with me that I couldn't touch Iyov. But if you let me touch Iyov and get into his flesh and blood, you'll see a different story. Ulam shlach neyatcha. So what does God say? You can send your hand. V'ga el atzmo ve'el b'saro im lo al panecha yivrachecha. Oh, sorry. This is still the Satan speaking. My mistake. The Satan says to God, I want to be able to get to his body. Okay, I'm going to get to atzmo b'saro, inside his flesh. And let's see, he uses the same words as before, im lo panecha yivrachecha. I bet that to your face he's going to curse you. Remember, Baruch is blessing, but it's used as a euphemism for cursing here. And I bet he'll curse your face. Vayomer Hashem ala Satan, hino biyadecha. So God says, fine, I'll give him to you. Ach et nafsho shmo. But don't do anything don't kill him. You can torture him, you can do whatever you want to his body, but anything short, you can't kill him. And then he starts to get boils and other things. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, there's a fascinating line, and we're going to see another line that's basically going to come out to support the Satan. Poor Satan, I feel so bad for him. But it was harder for him than it was for Iyov. Why? They give this analogy. They'd say to someone, break the barrel, but save the wine. Right? That's almost impossible to save the wine if you break the barrel. How is he going to keep Iyov's soul if he breaks apart his body? It's very hard to keep a soul living without the body properly functioning. So to get someone so sick, right, it's easy to break something completely, right? But that's not even what they're saying. They're saying more than that. Not just to break it with keeping it somewhat intact, but to break the outside and think that the inside will keep. How can you possibly do that? And it wasn't easy for the Satan to be able to do this. By the way, I want to just stop for a minute because I forgot. I mentioned the connection of Oz. I looked it up. It wasn't true. I don't know where I thought I found it before, but it's definitely not true. There were two reasons given for where Oz came from. Either he had a file cabinet that was O to Z, and when he was just thinking about it, that's where he came up with, or there was another reason that I saw that it had to do with ounces in gold and it was against money and something along those lines. So the reason originally that I thought that was connected, and then I don't know, I must have read something, I don't know what I read last when I thought about it, whatever had in my head, but in Hebrew, it's called Eretz Utz. That's what Oz is called. So they call it Utz. And by the way, you can do a search in Safari and see where Utz comes up in the Torah. It's mentioned as one of the sons of Nahor, and also it's mentioned in Breishit twice. One is the sons of Bnei Dishon, or Utz and Aran, and they're also listed, I think, as Aram. Anyway, the Utz comes up a little bit there. There's a few mentions of it in the Tanakh. There's one in Divrei Yamim also. Okay, let's move on. Amar Rish Lakish. Hu Satan, hu Yetzer Hara, hu Malach HaMavet. The Satan that we see in the Psukim, he had three talents, so to speak, okay? He was the Satan. Well, we're going to see what all the differences are here. He was the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and he is the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death. Hu Satan dechtiv vayaseh Satan me'et pnei Hashem. It says the Satan went away from God. What is Satan when we think about it, right? He's the one who comes to deliberate with God about who we're going to kill and who we're going to punish. Hu Yetzer Hara, which is between him and humans, right? He comes down, he tries to incite you to do bad things. How do we know that he's the Yetzer Hara also? K'tif hatam rak kol hayom. Okay, this is when it says at the end of the Parshat Breishit that God sees that what he built was right, what he created was bad, that the inclination of humans are just bad all day. So he uses the word rak. And K'tiv Hacha, here it says, Rak elecha al tishlach yadecha. The same word rak is used, right? Don't don't hit Iyov, right? Don't do anything to him. So rock, okay? The same word, that's, again, it's a bit of a loose connection, but that connects him with the Yetzer Hara. But don't attack it, right? Don't kill him. What does that show? Alma B'didei Kaima. Obviously, if he is told don't kill him, that means that you could kill him because you're the angel of death. I'm a Rabbi Levi. So here's the support of the Satan. Okay, Satan uPnina l'shem shamayim nitkavnu. Interesting, they put these two people in the same category. The Satan and Penina, if you remember, Penina was the other wife of Elkanah, who was married to Hannah, and Hannah didn't have children, and Penina had all these children. They both, and she was mean to Hannah. Well, she was mean to Hannah. She actually had good intentions in mind. So did the Satan. Satan, what were his good intentions here? Because he saw that God was so taken by Iyov, he said, if he leaves aside Avraham, he went out to bat for Avraham. And why Avraham? Because we talk about this in our prayers every day, that we are here b'zchut Avraham, right? And his Avraham being there helps us and helps God have mercy on us. So if God leaves Avraham aside, where's all the rachamim on the Jewish people? So he said, I don't want God to leave Avraham aside and forget about, that Avraham's there. And because Avraham, theoretically, the concept is, right, he's pleading for rachamim for us. God doesn't pay so much attention to him. Well, that will be it for the Jewish people. So because of that, that was his whole intent here. The pasuk says it. She tortured her. Why? Ba'avor har'ima, to get her going, meant to get her to pray. Right? So then Hannah would pray to God and then she'd have a child, which is what happened. So she had the right intentions in mind, even though she was doing something that, looked on the surface like it was really not right. Here's just a funny line. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov said this drasha that Rabbi Levi said, Ata Satan nashke l'kari. The Satan came and kissed his feet. He's so proud that he was saying nice things about him, right? I guess the Satan is used to getting a bad rap, and all of a sudden someone came and said something nice about him, and he felt so good about it. Okay, b'chol zot, or appreciated it. B'chol zot lo chata Iyov b'sfatav. This is a very strange pasuk. It says, and despite all the things that happened, Iyov didn't sin with his lips. Now, you could just say lo chata Iyov. What does it mean, lo chata b'sfatav? Well, it seems to imply, Amar Rava, and we're going to remember that Rava said this because we're going to see Rava say a whole bunch of things today, that, again, there's different approaches. Was Iyov okay? Was he not okay with all the things he did? Well, Amar Rava b'sfatav lo chata b'libo chata. He might not have sinned with his lips. He didn't say it, but he did have thoughts in his heart that were blasphemous kind of statements. Mike Amar, what did he say in his heart? Now here we're going to quote psukim that it says Iyov said, but Rava's claim is that he didn't actually express them out loud. He said them to himself. Eretz nitna biyad rasha, pnei shoftea yechaseh im lo efo mihu. Okay, we're starting with complicated psukim. They're very hard to translate. The gist of this pasuk is, without explaining every word for it, but the land was given to evil people to do with it what they want, basically. And God is nowhere to be found. In other words, there's no such thing as hashgacha pratit, as, we translate that? Someone help me? God kind of being ever present in everything going on in the world. So Amar Rava, bikesh Iyov lahafoch kara pia. In this, he really wanted to be blasphemous, saying basically there is no personal intervention of God in people's lives. There's a better term for it, but hashgacha pratit. Amar le Abai. Abai said to him, Lo diber Iyov ela keneged Satan. This wasn't a bad thing at all. Iyov wasn't talking about God. He was talking about the Satan in this pasuk. He was complaining about the Satan and not about God, and that therefore is okay. So Rava thinks it was bad, but at least he didn't express it, but he did have these blasphemous thoughts. And Abai thinks, no, it wasn't against God at all. Hitanai. And in fact, there's same machloket tanaim. Eretz nitna biyad rasha, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, b'kesh Iyov lahafoch kara al pia. He wanted to, right, this means to turn the plate upside down, which is just a metaphor for going against God. Amar Rabbi Yeshua lo diber Iyov ela klapei Satan. So the machloket Rava and Rava is the same. Rava and Abai is the same as Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Al da'atcha ki lo rasha. Okay, I'm going to have to go fast today because it's a really long daf. Even though there's a lot of interesting things to go into. Al da'atcha ki lo rasha ve'em miyadi matzil. It's all because of you that there's rishaim, and no one can be saved from you. You decide you're going to do something to someone, there's nothing to do about it. What does this pasuk mean, really? I'm a Rava. So again, Rava says, in this statement, he wanted to say, no one should be judged at all. Why? What was he really saying? Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, barat Shiur parsotav stukot, barat chamor parsotav klutot. Okay, you built, right? You created animals. This one has split hooves. This one has clove tube. I think they're called clove tubes. You created each animal, right, in their own particular way. Barata gan Eden, barata gehenom. You created gan Eden. You created hell. Barata tzadikim, barata reshaim. You created evil people. You created righteous people. Mima akev al yadecha. And who's going to stop you? In other words, you are all controlling. Okay, you created everybody the way they are, and this is saying basically there's no, right? It's all predetermination. There's no bechira chofshit. There's no freedom to change from what it is. God created you this way. That's the way you are. Cloven hooves. Thank you. So anyway, basically, Iyov is saying, you created us all the way we are, and there's evil people in the world on account of you, which is why Rava says he wanted to basically say no one should be judged because God's doing it all. It's like a marionette, kind of controlling everybody. So, my hadru lechavri Iyov, what did his friends say to him when he said this? You're going to basically cause people to stop fearing God, but if they hear you say this, and you're going to make it that people will stop praying to God. What do you mean? God created us, and he created an evil inclination that might pull us to do bad things. But the Torah, okay, for those learning, right, this is your solution. The Torah is the tavlin, the spice, but what it really means is the antidote. Okay, it's the antidote, and therefore it's up to everybody. Everybody has bechira chofshit, basically, to determine what the path of their life is going to be. Darash Rava, my dechtiv. Here's a positive pasuk about Iyov. Birkat oved alai tavo v'lev almana arnin. This is saying about himself. What is birkat oved alai tavo? Oved is those who are wandering, lost. Okay, the blessing of them will come from me. We would steal. There's a little bit of a weird thing. The commentary says it doesn't really mean steal. He would take fields from orphans, umashbicha, and make them better, improve them, umachzira lehem, and then he would return them, valued at a higher value. Lev almanar, this is kind of cute. There were all these almanot that couldn't find people to marry them, right? So it's less interesting for people to marry almanot. Hava, right, especially in their culture, right? They always wanted the unmarried women. Hava azil shade shmei ilave. What would he do to help them? He would put his name upon them, meaning he would say, oh, they're my relatives. And then havu atu naspala. People would then go marry them. Lu shakol yishakel kasi. Okay, now we're going to have a slew of psukim where Iyov says to God serious things like, I have an issue with this, and really comes very strongly toward God with complaints. Lu shakol yishakel kasi. If you put in a scale all my suffering on one side, that's my kasi. Vahavati, and my sins, b'moznayim yisu yachad. Put them in scales. I want to see. Does it really weigh up? I don't think so. I think I'm suffering much more than the weight of my sins. Amarav, it should be Rava. Afra lepume de Iyov. Put dust in the mouth of Iyov. Chavruta kaple shmaya. What, is he a friend of God that he could come to God with this kind of claim? Okay, and here I told you, pay attention. There was Rava before who said he said this in his heart. And now we're going to see that Rava understands these psukim, that basically Iyov was coming at God very strongly in a way that was very inappropriate. Second one. Lu yesh beinenu mochiach. There was an arbitrator between us. Yashet yado shnenu. He would put his hand on both of us and figure out who's right and who's wrong. Amarav after lepume de Rav. Dust in the mouth of Iyov. Or it should be Rava again. Put dust in the mouth of Iyov. Klum yesh evet shemochiach et rabo. Right? Is there a servant who would do this, speak this way to his master? Brit karati le'enai. This is a bit of a different one, but Brit karati le'enai mayat bonen al betula. Iyov says, but I'm so great. I made a covenant with my eyes that I wasn't even going to look at a virgin, okay, which is okay because you could potentially marry her. But, a married woman for sure I won't look at, and even a virgin I wouldn't look at. I'm a Rava, after the pume de Iyov, again, this is put dust in his mouth. here it's not, he said something wrong, but he said, I'm so great. And you know what? Avraham was greater than him. And this goes back to our comparison of Avraham and Iyov. Ihu ba'achroniyata. He was talking about other women. Avraham, afilu b'didelo is to kill. Avraham didn't even look at his own wife. How do we know this? Famous pasuk, dichtiv, hinena yadati ki ishayif amaret, right? When he goes into, I think it's the one when they go to Egypt, and the people of Paro say, oh, your wife is so beautiful. And he says, oh, now I know you're beautiful. What he didn't know before. That sounds like he really didn't know before that she was beautiful. Kula anan vayelach ken yored she'ol lo ya'aleh. Amar Rava mikan shekafar Iyov b'tchiyat hamitim. He says, just like the anan, goes off, you go to Sheol, you go down to the depths, you don't come out, which means he didn't believe in resurrection of the dead. So what do you see here? Iyov, really had, certainly in Rava's mind, the way Rava understands it, Iyov said very serious things against God. Asher b'sa'ara yeshufenu, you'll crush me with a storm. V'hirbap tza'ai chinam, and you've made me have all these wounds for no reason. Amar Rabba, Iyov b'sa'ara chiref u'b'sa'ara hashivu. Okay, Iyov here, yeah, it also should be Rava. They say, okay, I'm going by the notes on the Gemara here, on the text I have, that all these people were said by Rava, not Rav or Rabba. Often they get confused in the printed edition. Iyov b'sa'ara chiref u'b'sa'ara hashivu. Hey, he blasphemized God with a storm, with a tempest, and also got returned in a storm with a storm. Okay, that's the pasuk we just read. Amar lefanav, what did he really mean by this? Ribono shel olam, shema ruach sa'ara avra lefanecha v'nitchalef lecha ben Iyov le'oyev. He says to God, is it possible? And this is a great drasha on his name. Is it possible, God, that you confused Iyov and Oyev? Okay, that a storm came, mixed things up, and you got confused and you thought I was your enemy. Okay, you switch one letter, right? You get Oyev. Now, God is going to have many answers to this question, many ways of saying, I don't make those mistakes. Okay, that's not me. He answered him with a storm, and this you're going to see in the pasuk dichtiv. Vayan Hashem et Iyov min ha'sa'ara vayomar. God answered him from a storm and said, okay, get gird your loins, and I will explain to you. So what did he explain to him? Amar lo, harbeni mim, right now we're off of the pasuk, we're on the drasha. Harbeni mim barati ba'adam. Man is made, or humans are made with many hairs. Each one comes from a follicle. No two hairs come from one follicle. Okay, they could cause blindness, I guess, something that it would be detrimental to people's health. Right? I don't confuse between two hair follicles, two hairs and two, in the follicles. You think I'm going to confuse Iyov and Oyev? Second pasuk. Mi pileg l'shetaf ta'ala. Okay, I just want to check one thing, right? These are psukim, right? We're reading from, yeah. Now we're going to read a whole pasuk. We're going to break it up into parts and explain each part. Mi pileg l'shetaf ta'ala. Okay, who has divided a channel for the torrents of rain to go into the channel? Harbe tipim barati ba'avin. I made a lot of drops in the clouds. V'chol, right, raindrops. V'chol tipa v'tipa barati latfus b'fnei atzmain. Each raindrop has a place where it's supposed to fall. Kedei shelo yu shnei tipim yotzo mitfus echad, that no two come out of the same place. So I guess this is a tfus for them to come out of. If it would come down the wrong way, it would actually destroy the land rather than help it. So if I can distinguish between raindrops, obviously I can distinguish between Iyov and Oyev. My mashma dehai ta'ala listed fusu. How do we know that this is what a ta'ala means? Amar Breishit dichtiv vayas ta'ala kebetz hatayim zera. They mentioned the story of Eliyahu in Har Carmel. If you remember, he said, "Bring your own fire," and then he put, in order to show how miraculous his fire was going to be, he put this ta'ala, he made a channel, a ditch in the ground, and he filled it with water to have water all around where his fire is. V'derech lachaziz kolot, that's the continuation of that pasuk. Harbe kolot barati ba'avim, I made a lot of sounds, thunder in the clouds. The whole kol, the kol barati lo shvil b'fnei atzmo. Each one has its own place from where it goes down, its own path. Right, so that they don't all come out, no two come out together. If they were to come out, okay, you see that God can distinguish and prevent destruction, basically, by distinguishing here. Between thunders and thunders, what? I distinguish. You think I would get confused between Iyov and Oyev? Okay, here's another pasuk here. So do you know the time when the Ye'elim, forget exactly the word for Ye'elim, but when they give birth by the stones, by the rocks, Holel ayalot tishmor. So Ya'ala zo achzarit al baneha. Okay, she's very cruel to her children. B'sha'a shekorat laledet, moving out on bet. When she goes to give birth, Ola lerosh hahar, she does it at the top of the mountain. And what's going to happen if you give birth at the top of the mountain? A mountain goat. Okay, thank you. So the mountain goat goes up. It's called mountain goat, I guess. And goes up to the mountain to give birth. Now, what's supposed to happen? What's going to happen if you give birth on a mountain and the animal doesn't yet know how to stand? The mother is happy to have the offspring fall off the cliff and die. And then I have these neshers, the griffin vulture that comes down, sweeps them up, and saves them. Again, this distinction of God between here, it's a distinction in time. If I miss it by a second, right, the animal will die. So I can't, right? I can distinguish between seconds, milliseconds. You think I'll confuse Iyov and Oyev? Last part, the end of that pasuk, okay, her, again, I don't remember the Ayala's ram family, but I don't remember the word. Can help me with the English. Anyway, her womb, a gazelle. Thank you. The gazelle, her womb is very narrow, and it's impossible for her to give birth. I bring a dragon or something, not exactly what it is, that bites her right there. Okay, some people say a snake that bites her right there in the rechem, and then tears the womb a little bit, opens it. And then she's able to give birth. It softens it. She can then give birth. But if basically he would be off by a second, right, then the animal would die. So I do not make those mistakes, God says, and that is not a possibility. So we now saw a whole bunch of psukim that are all basically in that same category of explaining the comment of God that, again, it's all the drasha that Iyov said, maybe you confuse me with, your enemy. Iyov lo b'dat yitaber u'b'dvarav lo b'haskil. Now, even though Rava was saying Iyov said all these things, we're now going to darshan this pasuk, which really sounds like the simple reading. He didn't speak with knowledge, right? U'dvarav lo b'haskil. They weren't with intelligence, really meaning what? Amar Rava mikan she'en adam nitpas b'shat tzaro. In other words, what we're trying to say is that he didn't mean what he said, and he was in a moment of anger and a time of stress. And when bad things happen, you often say things that you don't really mean. So what it said is lo b'dat, not with knowledge, not with seichel. It didn't really mean that. It meant that it wasn't with bad intent, and God understood that Iyov was upset and therefore said these things, but he wasn't held accountable for them because of them. Okay, which is very interesting because we all know that when you're in a time of tragedy, you think things, right? Where we saw before, he thought it, didn't say it, right? And what they're trying to say is, we understand, right? It's excusable. Okay, so now we have this pasuk which explains, this is, like I said, a lot of the basis of the book is these three friends of Iyov come, and they come ish mim komo, each from where they lived. Elifaz Temani, Bildad Shuchi, Tzofar Hanamati. Those are the three friends. Vayiva'adu yachdav, and they came together. Lavo lanudlo ulenachamo. Okay, they came basically to try to comfort him. Okay, I said yesterday, friends, right? They came really to commiserate, to comfort. You'll see if you read the book, and I'm sure some of you have read Iyov, it's complicated because do they really console him? A lot of what they say is, God works in ways that someone sins and they get punished. And if you're getting punished, it must be that you sinned. I'm not sure that would be the first thing I would think to say to someone going into a shiva house where a tragedy had happened, which fortunately we've been through a lot lately, which is, that's not what you're supposed to say. And it's not, it's not what so, that's why I say, were they really his friends? I mean, they were, and we're going to see here that they really were his friends. The question is, did they really have the right way of going about it? Maybe that was, I don't know. And again, they used what they had in their heads. They didn't realize what was really going on, which that Iyov really wasn't deserving of it. And it was just that the Satan had this whole conversation with God. And maybe it's also trying to show, maybe part of the reason they say these things that they're so convinced are right. And, maybe the book's trying to show you that we don't really see the whole picture. And that might be our simple understanding of things, but things aren't black and white like that, even though we've been trained there's Sahar and Onesh and all that, but doesn't mean in reality that's always the way it is. Anyway, whether they were good friends or not, the Gemara clearly says they are good friends. And I think they really did have good intentions. It's just sometimes you have to know the right things to say. And it's a good lesson for, people when you go pay a Shiva call, what to say, what not to say is actually, as we all know, very important. So why does it say vayiva'adu yachdav? They came together, and both these words, avada is like to congregate, and they did it together. What are they trying to say? And it also said before they came each mimkamot from different places. Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav Milamed shenichnesu kulam b'shar echad. They went through one gate together at the same time. V'tana ben kol echad echad shlosh me'ot parsa. And yet they lived 300 parsaot away each from the other. And it was this kind of miracle that they all happened to come in at the exact same time. How did they know what happened? Right? No WhatsApps, no emails, no newspapers. How did they hear what happened to Iyov? Some people say they had a crown. Each one had a crown. Some people say with like three faces on it of each of their friends. And then, one face turned bad, and then they saw like turn sad. They saw something happen, like sort of a vision. Some people said they had a tree, one for each friend. And one withered up and dried up, and then they realized something had happened. And this is really what they're saying is they had some inner sense. And people have friendships like this or relationships with family members where they can sort of feel, they sense something is wrong, okay, whether it's real or not, right? But people talk about it, that they had some inner sense. I'm a Rav, and this is Rav says, this is what people say. You should have a friend like the friends of Iyov, omituta. Okay, we've seen this before. O chavruta, omituta. Here we have, right, with Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, right, without that friend, I'd rather just die if you don't have good friends like that. But, right, not worth living. Okay, now we're going to get to a sugya you're not going to like so much. It's a sugya that debates whether it's good to have female children or not. Okay, apropos the dedication of today for the birth of a granddaughter. Sorry to have a sugya that's going to a little bit shake up that idea. But now we're going to go to this pasuk. It's when in the end of Parshat Breishit also, there's this thing about when people started becoming plentiful al pnei adama and they had daughters. Question is this daughter thing, is it a good thing or not? Rabbi Yochanan Amar Riviyah Ba'al Olam. Having girls is a good thing. So I want to point out, there's two sides here. Having girls is a good thing because it brings, right, women are able to have children. So it brings more children into the world. Rish Lakish Amar Miriva Ba'al Olam. Okay, they're darshaning, I think, the phrase larov as Riviyah or Miriva, okay, which is fighting, okay, contention, because you might remember there's the sugya about how we took these, we'll get to your question, Becky. There are psukim in Kohelet, if I remember correctly, that, matzah isha matzah ra. It's definitely Kohelet. And, how women could create, you marry a woman, it could create a lot of contention. Not that it always does, but that it could bring strife and fighting. And so that's Rish Lakish's approach. Having girls is not necessarily a positive thing. Amar Rish Lakish the Rabbi Yochanan. The Dizach Da'amar Riviyah Ba'al Olam. And now why did we get to this? Because he says, now Iyov in the beginning has sons and daughters, and then at the end he gets blessed and things get doubled. He gets more of it, as if that's supposed to replace what was lost. That's all a story in and of itself. But he is blessed with double what he had. But if you notice, look at the psukim, the number of sons is doubled. The number of daughters is the same. He had 3 daughters before, he has 3 daughters after. So if having girls was a blessing, so why didn't he have double the amount of girls? Proof that I'm right. Amar lo, nihida lo nechpalu b'shemot, aval nechpalu b'yofi. Interesting answer. He said, well, he didn't end up with 6 girls, but he ended up with 3 better, more beautiful girls. How do we know they were beautiful? דכתיב, היו לו 7 בנים ו3 בנות. ויקרא שם אחת ימימה ושם השנייה קציעה, השני קציעה ושם השלישית קרן הפוך. So, what is Yemima? Yemima is Domer Liyom. Okay, Yemima from day, she was beautiful as day. This, by the way, Yemima and Ketzia come up in one of the keynote. We're getting to Tisha B'Av in a little while. Still have time, but when you get to the keynote in Tisha B'Av about the famous one about Rabbi Yishmael and his son and daughter who get taken by captors, and they say she's beautiful like Yemima and Ketzia. That's from here. That's from this Gemara. So Ketzia, Shaya Recha Nodef Ketzia, it's a spice, so she smelled beautiful like the spice. Keren Hapuch, that one's a little more complicated, because Keren is a horn. Hapuch, we're going to see what it is. It's not Hafuch, so let's see. Amr Debei Rabbi Shila, Shedomeh LeKarna de Keresh. It's like, she's beautiful like the Keren of a Keresh. Keresh, it's not clear what it is. Some people think a rhinoceros. Some people think a unicorn, right, which is not real. Mechai Chwaleh B'Marava in Israel, they made a joke of this. They said, come on, Karna de Keresh Lakuti, that's not a beautiful thing. That's you have a Karen, that's pretty ugly. Ela Amar Rav Chisda Kikor Kama Derishka Bimine. Shene'amar Ki Tikrai Bepuch. Okay. That pasuk is saying Bepuch when you adorn yourself. So Puch is adornment and Keren is a field or a garden. So the garden's adornment, which is what makes a garden beautiful, the Korkama Derishka, that's like the nicest part of the garden. We had that before, the saffron. Like the special saffron in a garden, that's the best of the best, and that's a reference to what her beauty. Keeping on the daughter theme, Rabbi Shimon Rebbe Ityadale Barta. He had a daughter. He's the son of Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Hava Kachal Shadat. He was upset. He wanted a son. Amar le'avua. Rebbe says to him, Rabbi Yabba Olam. What do you mean? This is a great thing, right? This brings more children to the world. Amar le Bar Kapara. Tanchumim shall hevel nichamcha avucha. Okay, so much for consoling someone. He says, your father, Bar Kapara, says, consoled you with nothingness. Okay, Ditanya, Efshar Olam. Here's an answer to your question, Becky. The world cannot exist below Zcharim or below Nekevot. Okay, you need males and females to exist. Otherwise, the world, without girls, what are you going to have? Ella, right? Becky asked, don't you need girls to have boys, right? Women, females to have males. Anyway, Ella Ashrei Lemish. So despite the fact that you need them, right? Let them be with other people, let the other people give birth to females. But Ashrei Lemisha Banav Zcharim, right? Happy is the person who has male sons. Oilo Lemisha Banav Nekevot. And woe is to the one who has the daughters. Efshar Olam, and here's the analogy, the parable. Efshar Olam below Basam below Borsi. You can't live without the perfumer and without the tanner. But Ashrei Misha, and they're obviously doing a play on words of Borsi, Busmi, they sound the same. Ashrei Misha, I want to tell Busmi. Oilo Lemisha, I want to tell Borsi. Okay, it sounds much better in Hebrew because of the play on words. But happy is the person who that's their job to be the perfumer. They're always surrounded with beautiful smell, as opposed to the odors, the terrible odors, and the tannery, which we've talked about a lot. The Borsi, you don't want to be that person, even though you need them in the world. So this is an interesting analogy. First of all, my head is thinking about the Chok HaGiyus also, right? You need people to learn, you need people to this, but I don't know. That's it's a hard one. So anyway, this is a hard one to swallow as a woman. Again, you have to think about, we definitely see this theme a number of times. They really wanted male children, perhaps to learn Torah with them, and that was their image to leaders. In those days, especially, the women weren't leaders in any way. Obviously, the women were very helpful. I don't know how they would survive without women. You had all boys. Poor wife, she was doing everything herself. Anyway, something to think about, but you do see there's 2 different sides, and that's what they're going to say right now. And this is going to lead us to the end of the daf, even though we're not close enough time-wise, but here we go. The last part of the daf is like this. Kitanai. Well, it's actually machloket tanaim. And here they want to say, basically, there's a machloket about this, okay? They want to be clear. There's 2 sides here. And there's a famous pasuk about Avraham, chapter 21, verse 1 in Breishit. V'Hashem berachat Avraham bakol. Avraham was blessed, literal reading, with everything. Okay. What is this bakol? So 7 interpretations. And then we're going to have to explain the last 2, and that's going to take us to the end of the daf. My bakol, Rabbi Meir Omer, shelo hayta lo bat. Here you have the approach. He only had sons. That was his blessing, because, especially if you hold it's mirivat, brings contention. It was good he didn't have a daughter. But the next 2, we're going to say it was good he had a daughter. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, shayta lo bat. He was blessed with everything. That not only did he have sons, he also had daughters. Wow, he had everything. The blessing was the daughter. Forget, it wasn't, he had also daughters besides everything else. The blessing was the daughter, okay? This woman has 4 daughters. I definitely feel blessed every day that I have lots of daughters. Also love my son, but right, the daughters are great, great blessing. And what do we see here? Her name was Bakol. Okay, that was her name. So that's what it means. Bakol, that was her name. Feel bad for her about her name, but okay. Rabbi Elazar Hamoda Iyomel. It's stagninu. Okay, we're now going to have 4 other completely different interpretations. What Avraham was blessed with had nothing to do with his children. It's stagninut. Hayta b'libo shel Avraham Avinu. He saw into the future kind of thing. He was so wise, he gave advice to everybody from everywhere. That was his blessing. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, Even Tovai Tatzluya b'tzavarosh shel Avraham Avinu shekol choleho re'oto miyam torpeh. He had a special stone he would wear that all the sick people would come to him and that they would be healed by that stone. What happened to that stone? Obviously, we want to know. God hung it on the sun. And that's why Amar Abai, this is what people say, as the day progresses, the sickness goes away. Okay, because the sun heals diseases. Davar acher, they didn't obviously know about skin cancer. Davar acher, shalom marad Esav biyamav. Okay, so another thing, that Esav didn't rebel until Avraham died. We're going to see that now. And another davar acher, another option, Yishmael tshuva biyamav, that Yishmael did tshuva when, still in the day of Avraham. Okay, Shalom Arad Esav b'yamav minal, and these last 2 are interesting about, the one we always think is the one on the out, and it's always black and white, he's bad, 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 right? So Esav was good until Avraham died. Yishmael turned to be good, right, while Avraham was still alive. So how do we know Shalom Arad Esav b'yamav? Dichtiv, on that fateful day, Vayavo Esav and Asadeh v'hu ayef, and Yaakov is making the lentil stew, and he basically sells his bechorah, he sells his firstborn. So they say, Oto hayom yiftar Avraham Avinu. How do we know this? Because Asay Yaakov Avinu tafshil shaladashim lenachem et Yitzchak Aviv. Why else would he be making lentils? It was the Suda of the what we call the Suda for Ab, but the Suda to comfort his father. Why lentils? And this is where we get some customs of Avelut from. Amr b'marav mishmei d'Rabba. Mary ma dashazo ein la peh, af avel ein lo peh. Okay, they're not like cracked. A lot of grains are cracked in the middle. They have a cut in the middle. It doesn't have an opening. It's like an avel who doesn't have anything to say, right? They're often just silent. It's their response. Davar acher, ma dashazo megugelet. It's round. It's a hard one to read these days. Af avilut megalgelet umechazeret al ba'ei olam. Okay, the avilut is like a circle. It's just like a ball. It keeps rolling, 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 and goes around gets to everywhere in the world. And almost like doesn't stop. My benayu, ika benayu, linachumi bebe. What would be the difference between them? Well, if you have eggs have no opening, but they're not round. Like they don't roll as much. They're oval. So then, right, eggs are also something we always associate with Havelut. That's because it doesn't have an opening. It doesn't have a mouth. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Chamesh averot avaro Torah Shabbat to'ayom, Baal naram rasa, slept with a betrothed woman, Harag et nefesh, he killed someone, Kafar b'ikar, he went against God, Kafar b'tchiat ha'metim, he didn't believe, he denied resurrection of the dead, Vishat et ha'bechorah, and he gave away, right, he just didn't care about the bechorah, about the firstborn, the right of being the firstborn. Baal naram rasa, how do we get that? Tivhacha, vayavo esav min hasadeh. And where does the sadeh appear in the naram rasa? Remember, Tivhatam ki b'sadeh mitzah, because he found her in the field. Harag et nefesh, Tivhatam ayeh, Tivhacha oina li ki ayefa nafshi lahorgim. Paskin Yirmiyahu puts together tired with people who kill. Kafar, not exactly that's the meaning, but that's the connection. Kafar bi'ikar k'tiv lama zeli. Why do I need this bechorah? And he says lama zeh. What zeh? Tivhatam zeh ili vanvev. That's God. Kafar b'tchiat mitim. He says I'm going to die. And what do I need this for? Once I'm dead, that's the end of it. There's no resurrection of the dead. Because it says vayivaz esav et bechorah. Okay, last thing, let's see if we can get through it. Sha'asaya, Yishmael tshuva b'yamav minalan, ki had Ravina v'Avraham Barbuzi, avayat v'kamei de Rava. They were sitting in front of Rava, v'kamen namnim Rava. Rava fell asleep. Amalei Ravina l'Avraham Barbuzi, v'adai da'amaritu, kol mitah sheyesh ba gvi'ah, Zomi tatan shel tzadikim. Is it true what you say that every time it says vayigva in the Torah, that's a death of a tzaddik? Amar le'in, he said yes. V'hador mabul, but by the Dor Mabul it says that the people of the flood, they weren't good people. Amar le'ana gvi'a ve'asef hakamina. What I meant was when it says vayigva vayasef alamav. These are words used just for tzadikim. But it says that by Yishmael. In the meanwhile, Rava wakes up. Amarlu, Dardaki, my children. What are you talking about? He did tshuva in his father's lifetime. Shneemal. How do we know? Why is Yitzchak up here first? Because Yishmael let him go first. Maybe he didn't let him go first. Right? That's his tshuva. He let Yitzchak go first, even though he was much younger than him. But maybe it was just the present tells us that because Yitzchak was wiser or more important. But then look at the other pasuk. In Yitzchak's death, it says Esav first. You think my time right? There you should have put Yaakov first. So Elamida Aktame, it must be the fact he was first. Adbure Adbure, Mida Adbure, Shmamina Tshuva Vabiyamav. He must have led him to be the first. And there you see he did Tshuva, and that's the seventh interpretation to Avraham, Shem Berach Avraham bakol. Okay, I'm not going to review the daf because it's way late, but very interesting daf, a lot more to go into here, and we'll pick up from here tomorrow. Wishing everyone a good day. B'Shalom Tova.